Most people think men fall in love with what they see, but the truth is far deeper. Behind the surface lies a storm of emotional conflict, psychological patterns, and silent tests he's not even aware he's giving you. When a man falls in love, it's not loud. It doesn't always look like obsession or infatuation. In fact, it often begins with silence, a moment of stillness where something clicks in his mind, and he starts to see you differently. He begins to crave not just your presence, but your energy, your peace, your essence. Your absence suddenly feels heavier than your presence ever did. That's the first signal, the moment love takes root. But here's what no one tells you. A man doesn't fall in love when everything is perfect. He falls in love when you show him emotional safety in his imperfection. When you hold space for him without trying to fix, change, or chase. That's when the male brain, built to protect and provide, lets down its guard. And beneath all the ego, the silence, the toughness, is a boy who just wants to be understood without judgment. In this video, we're peeling back every layer, what triggers this emotional shift, why men test emotional safety before falling, and what signs you can look for, even when he's trying to hide it. If you've ever been confused by a man who seems close one moment and distant the next, you're not alone. This is the real psychology behind male love. Raw, honest, and nothing like the fairy tales. Let's go deeper. Love doesn't just live in the heart, it begins in the brain. And for men, the journey of falling in love is a silent war between biology and vulnerability. When a man begins to fall in love, his brain shifts into overdrive. What looks like a simple attraction on the outside is actually a neurochemical cascade inside his mind. One that even he doesn't fully understand. The first hormone that takes center stage, dopamine. This is the reward chemical, the same one released during winning, achievement, and risk-taking. When he sees you, hears from you, or even thinks about you, dopamine floods his system. You become his new source of pleasure. His brain starts associating you with emotional highs, just like a powerful addiction. But love isn't just about excitement. That's where oxytocin comes in, the hormone of bonding and trust. Most people assume women feel more of it, but when a man is emotionally safe, oxytocin levels spike in him too. This is what makes him start opening up, wanting to be close and desiring deeper connection. Not just physical, but emotional. Here's what's fascinating. When men trust you, their testosterone doesn't drop, it adapts. It becomes protective. He doesn't lose his masculinity. He channels it toward protecting what he loves. So if he begins to act more thoughtful, more present, more territorial, that's biology responding to emotional attachment. But love is also scary. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, can fire just as hard. He might feel anxiety, confusion, or the urge to pull away, not because he doesn't feel love, but because his brain associates love with vulnerability and the risk of losing control. In these moments, you'll see distance, silence, or even mood shifts. But behind the scenes, his brain is trying to decide if love is safe. You see, a man's brain is built to solve problems and minimize risk. And love, real love, feels like the biggest emotional risk of all. So if he pulls away, it's not always rejection. It may be his brain attempting to protect him from being emotionally exposed. If he keeps coming back though, even after creating space, that's dopamine and oxytocin drawing him in. That's real emotional imprinting. And once a man crosses the threshold, when the chemicals align with emotional safety, love becomes his new internal compass. He'll want to invest, protect, and build, not because he's been convinced, but because his biology and heart finally agree. This is the science behind his silence, his glances, his random messages, and his emotional shifts. It's never just instinct, it's the brain in love. And understanding this gives you power, not to manipulate him, but to connect with him on a level most people never reach. Let's go even deeper. Attraction may open the door, but it's emotion that keeps a man walking towards you. And that journey starts with something deeper than looks. It starts with emotional triggers that speak to his unspoken needs. Most people think men are simple, that they fall for physical beauty, a certain kind of voice, or the way you look at them. But here's the truth. Those are surface level sparks. The real fire is lit when you trigger something he wasn't expecting to feel. One of the most powerful emotional triggers for a man is feeling understood without needing to explain himself. When he senses that you get him, not through what he says, but through what he holds back, it hits differently. Men often carry emotional armor, so when you respond with empathy rather than interrogation, his guard starts to lower. Another trigger? Respect, not just admiration. Admiration is when you praise what he does, but respect, that's when you honor who he is, even when he hasn't proven anything yet. When you speak to his potential, not just his performance, he begins to feel emotionally seen. And that kind of visibility is rare for a man. Freedom within connection is another unexpected trigger. A man falls deeper when he feels emotionally close without feeling trapped. When he knows you don't need to control him, fix him, or constantly be in his space to feel secure. That's magnetic. It tells his subconscious, I can breathe here, I can grow here. Also, never underestimate the power of consistency with mystery. When your energy is warm, reliable, and grounded, but you still leave space for him to explore your mind, your dreams, your emotions, it creates a psychological pull. He becomes intrigued, not by what you show, but by what you withhold with grace. Then there's the quiet trigger of emotional safety. When a man sees that you're not reactive, that you can hold space for his silence, his uncertainty, or even his temporary detachment, it makes you feel like home to him. Not because you're passive, but because your energy doesn't come from insecurity. That's rare and unforgettable. Finally, the deepest emotional trigger, a woman who inspires him to become a better man, without demanding it. Not with lectures, not with pressure, but simply by being a reflection of the kind of life and love he wants to rise into. That's when a man starts to lean in. Not because he's chasing novelty, but because your presence triggers a quiet knowing inside him. I'm better when I'm with her. And that's the kind of connection that no dopamine rush or casual thrill can ever replace. Before a man gives his heart fully, he gives you something else first, a test. Not out of manipulation, but out of instinct. He needs to know, can you hold space for his truth? It might feel like he's pulling away just when things are getting close, or he suddenly becomes distant after sharing something deep. Sometimes he even creates conflict, where none existed. But here's the reality. Men test women before they commit, not because they want to play games, but because emotional commitment feels like exposure. And for many men, that's terrifying. Unlike women, who often seek connection and depth early, men are biologically and psychologically wired to assess safety before surrendering emotionally. These tests aren't always intentional. They're subconscious stress signals, checking for emotional patterns he was trained to avoid: judgment, pressure, instability, or control. One of the first tests, emotional reactivity. He might say something triggering or withdraw for a while. Not to hurt you, but to see, will she panic? Will she chase? Will she try to fix or force? What he's really asking is, can I be imperfect around her and still be accepted? Another test is boundary. If you always overextend, overgive, or abandon yourself to keep him happy, he notices, not as gratitude, but as a red flag. Why? Because a woman who can't hold her boundaries may struggle to hold his heart. Respect isn't just sexy, it's reassuring. Then comes the space test. He may go silent, take longer to reply, or prioritize something else momentarily. Not because you're not important, but because he wants to feel whether your energy remains calm and grounded when he pulls away. If you react with desperation, it can feel like emotional pressure. But if you respond with stillness and self-respect, he feels safe, not smothered. Men also test for authenticity. If you're constantly trying to impress him, agree with everything, or hide your opinions to be more likable, he senses it. And deep down, he wonders, if I open up to her, will I get the real her, or just the version she thinks I want? But here's the secret. When you pass these tests, not by performing, but by being self-aware, grounded, and emotionally intelligent, you unlock something profound inside him. You become the one he doesn't need to guard himself from, the one who lets him breathe and belong. Because at the end of the day, a man doesn't fall for perfection. He falls for the woman who makes him feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to drop the mask, to finally stop testing. And when that moment comes, he doesn't just commit, he commits with certainty. Because he knows the foundation isn't made of illusion. It's built on truth, trust, and emotional safety. And that is where real love begins. Lust is instant. Love is revealed. And somewhere in between, there's a sacred moment when a man realizes he wants more than just your body. He wants your soul. Lust is loud. It shows up fast, with urgency, excitement, and desire. It's the quickened heartbeat, the magnetism, the craving to be near you, touch you, taste you, claim you. It's what gets his attention, but it's not what keeps it. Because at some point, if it's real, something shifts. The excitement of physical attraction softens and is replaced by something deeper, a pull toward your mind, your voice, your silence, your essence. That's the moment the male brain transitions from lust to emotional love, and it often catches him off guard. At first he may try to fight it. He tells himself it's just chemistry, just fun. But then he starts noticing things. He starts missing your energy, not just your body. He finds himself thinking about how your laugh makes him feel, or how your presence calms his chaos. He starts wondering what you're doing, who you are when he's not around, not out of jealousy, but out of emotional curiosity. This is the second layer of love, the shift from desire to devotion. Neurologically, this is when oxytocin and vasopressin begin to rise. He starts associating you with comfort, connection, and home. And suddenly, sex isn't about release anymore. It's about closeness, about fusing body and emotion in the same space. This shift isn't always obvious. It can look like silence, like distance, because now he's vulnerable. He's no longer in control. What started as a chase has become a connection, and connection demands honesty. So he may test the waters. He might share a story he's never told anyone. He might show you his stress, his weakness, his part, not for pity, but because your response to his vulnerability tells him whether this love is safe. And here's the secret. He falls deeper when you hold space without judgment, when you don't flinch at his shadows, when you allow love to grow slowly, without needing to define or label it too soon. That's when he starts to protect you, not out of ego, but out of instinct. That's when you stop being someone he desires, and start becoming someone he cherishes. Lust is selfish. Love is generous. Lust is about taking. Love is about giving without fear. When a man transitions from lust to emotional love, his world rearranges. You become more than a fantasy. You become a mirror reflecting the kind of man he wants to be beside you. And when that moment comes, he doesn't just want your body. He wants your trust, your respect, that's real love. And it's if you've ever wondered why a man seems close one day and cold the next, it's not always about you. Sometimes it's about the war happening inside him. The fear of being truly seen and not being enough once he is. For many men, vulnerability doesn't come naturally. It wasn't taught. It wasn't modeled. In fact, most were conditioned to hide it, fear it, or fight it. From an early age, they were told to man up, to stay strong, to never cry. So emotions became things to manage or suppress, not express. By the time he reaches adulthood, he's built emotional armor so thick, not even he knows what's underneath it anymore. But love, real, emotional love, demands exposure. It requires him to drop the guard, to admit the mess, to let someone see him not just in strength, but in uncertainty, weakness, and doubt. That's terrifying. Why? Because deep down, every man carries an unspoken fear. If she sees the real me, the insecure me, the broken parts, will she still stay? This is why he might retreat after moments of closeness, why he suddenly becomes sarcastic or quiet when things get too emotional, why he avoids serious talks or brushes off deeper questions with jokes or silence. It's not that he doesn't care, it's that caring means risking rejection at the deepest level. Not for what he does, but for who he is. And that's where the fear of emotional exposure lives. In the belief that love must be earned through performance, not presence. In the silent shame of feeling like his emotions are too much, or worse, not enough. But here's what most don't realize. The closer he feels to you, the more intense these fears can become. Because now you matter, and now your opinion of him carries emotional weight. So when he pulls away, it's often a defense mechanism, a subconscious effort to regain control, to test whether he's safe, before handing over the most fragile parts of himself. But here's the beauty. When you don't chase his vulnerability, but instead create space for it, he notices. When you respond with calmness, patience, and presence, not pressure, he slowly learns something new. Maybe I don't have to hide here. And in that safety, a transformation begins. He may not open up all at once. He may take time, but with consistency and emotional security, that armor begins to crack. And behind it is a man who deeply wants to be known, loved, and held emotionally, just like anyone else. Because even the strongest man still wants a place where he can lay his emotional weapons down. And if you become that place not by force, but by being, He will trust you with parts of himself no one else has ever seen. That's not just connection. That's emotional intimacy. And for a man, that's everything. When he pulls away, your mind starts racing. Did I do something wrong? Did he lose interest? But often, his silence doesn't mean rejection. It means his heart is trying to protect itself. Pulling away. It's the most confusing part of modern relationships. One moment he's present, texting you good morning, asking about your day, making plans, and the next, cold, distant, silent. And in that silence, 1,000 insecurities rise. Did I say too much? Was I too available? Is he talking to someone else? But here's the truth. When a man pulls away, it rarely means he doesn't care. More often, it means he cares more than he expected to. And that realization shakes something loose inside him. You see, men process emotions differently than women. Where women often seek connection to soothe uncertainty, men isolate to regulate. When he starts to feel vulnerable, emotionally exposed, or even just overwhelmed by how much he likes you, his instinct isn't to move closer. It's to retreat and make sense of it alone. Why? Because for a man, emotional intensity feels like risk. Risk of being hurt. Risk of losing freedom. Risk of not living up to your expectations. And above all, risk of not being enough. Pulling away is a form of emotional self-defense. It gives him space to breathe, to process, to test his own feelings without the pressure of being watched. In his mind, he might be asking himself, am I ready for this? Can I show up for her the way she deserves? What if I get too close and it all falls apart? The space isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting his inner world. And ironically, it's often in the space that his true feelings become clear to himself. But here's where it gets powerful. How you respond to his distance can determine what happens next. If you panic, chase, or overcompensate, his fear deepens. He reads your reaction as emotional instability, and it confirms his doubt. Maybe I'm not safe here. But if you respond with graceful detachment, calm, grounded, and self-assured, he feels something entirely different. He senses that your world doesn't collapse in his absence, that you love, but you don't cling. You're open, but not desperate. That kind of energy is magnetic, because it tells him, I want you, but I don't need to lose myself to have you. When a man pulls away and finds peace instead of pressure, his walls begin to crumble. He starts missing the calm, the warmth, the respect. And when he returns, which he often does, it's not just as a lover, but as someone who realizes she didn't chase me, and that's why I trust her. Because real love doesn't beg, and sometimes a little space is exactly what the heart needs to choose someone for the right reason. A man's heart isn't locked because he doesn't feel it's locked, because somewhere along the way, he was taught that feeling made him weak. Most men aren't emotionally unavailable by choice. They've simply never been given the space, the safety, or the understanding to express what's going on inside. You may see him pull away, deflect with humor, or change the subject when things get deep. But that doesn't mean he's not capable of depth. It means he's been trained to fear it. Unlocking a man's emotional side isn't about force or pressure. It's not about asking him to be someone he's not. It's about creating an environment where his emotions don't feel like a risk, where his silence isn't punished, and his truth isn't used against him. He's not waiting for someone who demands his vulnerability. He's waiting for someone who makes vulnerability feel natural. Someone who doesn't flinch when he opens up, who doesn't overreact to his shadows. The more emotionally safe he feels around you, the more emotionally honest he becomes. This happens quietly. It's in the way you stay calm when he shuts down. It's in how you let silence breathe without panicking. It's in the way you listen, not to fix him or decode him, but simply to witness him. Sometimes the deepest emotional connection doesn't come from talking. It comes from your energy, from how you show him that he doesn't have to earn your softness by proving his strength. When you speak your own truth gently, when you show your emotions without shame, you unconsciously give him permission to do the same. That's how he learns that feeling something doesn't make him less of a man. It makes him more of a human. When he begins to open up, maybe slowly, maybe in fragments, it's crucial not to make his honesty feel like a burden. If he shares something from his past, his pain, his pressure, resist the urge to solve it. He doesn't need answers. He needs presence. A simple thank you for trusting me with that does more than a dozen solutions ever could. Men remember who made them feel safe, And emotional safety is rare in a world where they're taught to perform strength and hide struggle. If you rush his process, he'll shut down. If you try to drag his emotions out of him, he'll retreat even further. But if you remain grounded in your own energy, loving but not needy, open but not chasing, he starts to feel a pull back toward you, not out of obligation, but out of trust. Because emotional intimacy is not something you can demand. It's something you have to inspire. And that inspiration comes from showing that you can hold space for who he really is. Not just the parts that are easy to love, but also the parts that are hidden, raw, and still healing. Most men don't want to be alone. They just want to know that if they let someone into the deepest parts of their mind and heart, that person won't run when it gets real. They're not afraid of connection. They're afraid of collapse, of opening up and being met with chaos, of sharing their soul and watching someone weaponize it later. So the key isn't in convincing him to open up. The key is in becoming the kind of woman who makes emotional safety feel effortless. The kind of woman whose silence feels like peace, whose presence feels like hope. And once he finds that, once he feels it, not just hears it, he'll offer you his emotions not because you asked, but because he wants you to have them. And when that moment comes, it's no longer about unlocking him. It's about meeting him fully, deeply, and without fear. Not every man will say the words. But if you know how to read the silence between his actions, you'll hear everything he's too afraid to speak. Men often express love in subtle, understated ways. It may not come with poetic words or emotional confessions, but it's there woven into his behavior, hidden in the little things, quietly echoing from his choices. A man may not say, "I love you," but the signs are there if you know where to look. When a man is falling for you, his attention shifts. You'll notice how he starts to prioritize you without announcing it. He'll remember the smallest details you mentioned in passing. Your favorite snack, the story behind your scar, the way you like your coffee. He's not just listening to respond. He's listening to understand, because suddenly, what matters to you starts to matter deeply to him. He'll check in not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's not. If you're sick, tired, stressed, or quiet, he notices, and more importantly, he cares. He doesn't always know how to fix it, but his instinct is to show up. Even if it's just with a text, a call, a meme that makes you laugh, he finds ways to be present in your world. A man falling in love becomes protective, not possessive. It's not about control, it's about concern. He watches how others treat you. He steps in quietly when he senses you're uncomfortable. He may not always say, "I care about you deeply," but his actions whisper it loud and clear when he holds the door, offers his jacket, walks on the traffic side of the sidewalk. These are his ways of saying, "I've got you." He also starts to open up more, little by little. Maybe not all at once, but you'll notice moments where he lets the mask slip. He'll share something personal, something vulnerable, even if it's short. That's not just talk, that's trust. That's him letting you into a space few people ever see. Another sign, he includes you in his future without making it a big deal. He'll say things like, "We should try that place one day," or "Next year we could go there together." He's not planning it like a contract. He's imagining it because in his heart, you're already part of his long-term picture. His eyes soften around you. His energy shifts when you walk into the room. He starts to mirror you, not just in body language, but in emotional presence. He gives you his time even when he's busy, his attention even when he's distracted, and his consistency when no one else is being consistent. Love for men is often quieter than we expect, but make no mistake, it's there, and sometimes it's the man who doesn't say it, who feels it the most deeply, because when a man is falling in love, he might not use words, but his devotion, that's the language he speaks fluently. Love isn't a mystery once you understand the mind behind it, because even if he doesn't say the words, his psychology reveals the truth. So what have we really uncovered? The way a man falls in love is not always loud. It's not always obvious, and it's rarely rushed. His process is internal, protective, and deeply psychological. But that doesn't mean it's less powerful. It just means it's more complex. In the beginning, it often starts with attraction. But true love for a man doesn't settle in the moment his eyes light up. It begins when he feels safe, when he feels seen without being judged, heard without being fixed, and valued without needing to perform. That's when something changes in his brain. His hormones, like dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin, begin to shift. And those shifts aren't just chemicals, they're clues. They show up in his behavior. He starts investing his time, his thoughts, his protection. He begins to plan around you, not just with you. And while he may never articulate what's happening out loud, Psychology tells us that men bond through shared experiences, trust built over time, and emotional peace, not emotional chaos. We also uncovered a truth many people miss. Before a man truly opens his heart, he tests the space he's about to step into. He might pull back to see how you react. Not because he's playing games, but because deep down, he needs to know, is it safe to give her all of me? When he sees you won't chase, won't punish, won't collapse in his absence, that's when trust begins. We explored how men shift from lust to emotional connection, how the initial spark turns into something deeper when a woman shows that she values herself, and how a man's fears of vulnerability, of being seen and still chosen, can block his heart unless he's with someone who meets him with grace, not judgment. Most importantly, we talked about emotional safety, how unlocking his emotional side isn't about pushing him,